are the same, but what them, some of them have changed fairly dramatically. So let me start out with the construction defects claims bills that we've been talking about. On the report, you'll now notice I have put unknown up there because they've changed so much. The Senate bill was fine, and it went to the floor this week, yesterday, as a matter of fact. And at the last minute, they put an amendment on there that creates a 7-year statute of repose rather than 10. The period begins to run 45 days after the completion of the improvement, and they defined that in the bill. But the worrying part is not counting single family residents, they're exempt. It allows a claim at any time if fraudulent concealment can be proven against the engineer, architect, contractor. And it says clear and convincing evidence is needed, and so on and so on. But that's just open ended. I mean, that could be 20 years down the road. If they can prove, that's a pretty high bar to meet, clear and convincing evidence. But I'm not real thrilled with that. Does give us the 7-year statute of repose on the other side. But I don't know why the Senate did that. It appeared as that everything was okay. As a matter of fact, the last I had heard, and I don't know if Derek's on the phone, the last he had heard was that they were going to pull these bills and forward. What worries me now, though, is that they're very close. The Senate bill's very close now to the House bill, 583. And if you'll remember, the House bill was the one where they were going to repeal Chapter 558. And we were, fighting back to keep 558.003, the individual engineer liability protections. Well, now it no longer repeals 558, so that issue out of the way. But this one does kind of the same thing. It creates a 7-year statute of repose for latent defects. It creates a 15-year statute of repose if fraudulent concealment can be proven. Rather than just being open-ended, it goes to 15 years. And the same with the period beginning to run 45 days after completion of the improvement. So all of this popped up at the end of the week. Or I would have run this past the CLGR, but if anybody's got any comments on that, please don't hesitate to speak up or send me an email, because I don't really know. When we first started this, it didn't seem to me, at least the people I was talking to, like the statute of repose was all that important to them. So I don't know if trading out, getting 7 years instead of 10 years, and the trade being 15 years, if something can proven to be fraudulent works, or that's just a no-go. But the problem is that the Senate bill now has passed second reading on the House, which means it just has to go to third reading. They normally do that. Once it passes second reading, that's where they do amendments. Third reading is more debate. They can amend it if they want to, but they don't usually do that. And it normally happens the next time the body is in full session. So, it may happen very quickly over in the Senate. The House bill still has one more committee to get through, the Judiciary Committee, before it would go to the floor. So there's still a little time to work on it, but not a whole lot. I just want everybody paying attention to that. And I don't know, again, what your feelings are on the statute of repose.
Oh, okay. I didn't know you had a double.
If somebody's talking, are you talking to me?
I don't think so. I'll mute them, Alan.
So let me see if I can see this question. Well, Sham, I don't really know the answer to the question. The question is, so if the contractor has fraudulently concealed, does that bring the engineer back in? My assumption would be that if a claim is made, they typically bring everybody in, and then weed it out from there. So I would probably say that's, up to the attorney or whoever that's filing the claim as to how many people they want to name. But I don't know how you get clear and convincing evidence 20 years later that somebody fraudulently concealed a defect. I mean, you would need emails or something. I mean, you couldn't just say, well, it's there, so obviously it was fraudulently concealed. You clear and convincing evidence means you have to have something. So that's interesting. But yeah, please send along your comments if you would, since I'm not hearing any here. I don't want to hold this up, but if you have any comments about that, please send them along. And I'll be talking, with the other groups I meet with weekly, our executive committee and some others. And the other thing, just so everybody knows, Derek, are you on the phone?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay. Is John back yet?
He is back. He's back in the office today. He just actually communicated with me.
I'll send him a message or something and chat with him once he gets settled. Just so everybody knows, John had a family emergency and was gone a couple of days this week. So, and he knows more about this issue than I do. So, I'll talk to him and kind of see where we're at. So, look for another report coming on that, fairly soon. All righty. Let's move on to transportation projects. JW, I may need your help with this one. I've been saying this wrong. I've been saying that the House bill was 250 and the Senate bill was 400 million, but it's the Senate bill is $250 million. The project to use progressive design build contracts, it has to be 250 million or more. In the House, it's 400 million or more. So they're a little bit different there. I don't know if they're going to, where they're going to settle on that, but that's not a real big difference. I mean, they can come to some agreement on that. Just so everybody knows, this also contains language. I don't normally bring it up because we're not really weighing in on it, but it does contain language. Current law says that for certain types of projects, seaports and airports, and I think transit, at least 15% of the annual revenue of the Transportation Trust Fund must be spent on those projects. It's silent. Current language is silent to the cap. The bill would also add a cap of no more than 25% of the annual revenue of the trust fund could be spent on those projects. Last year, I know that the ports really beefed about this. This year, I haven't heard a whole lot. Derek, are the airports saying anything?
They still have concerns about the 25%, as well as the ports and the transit authorities. They've talked to the sponsors, talked to the department as well, but there really hasn't been, the sponsors have been open to listening. There really hasn't been any commitment to making any changes in that regard.
Okay.
Alan, if I may,
yeah, go
during
ahead.
our meeting on Wednesday with Secretary Tebow, the department strongly opposes the 25% maximum.
That's correct.
They feel that there is, a potential during any given year that there may be an individual project that would push them over that. And they've expressed that strong opposition to that cap. So I don't know what the final outcome is going to be, but Secretary Tebow was pretty adamant that, they didn't like it because it limited them and could potentially prevent them from doing a significant improvement where a single project would push them over that limit. So.
Okay, so, but in the past, and I assume we're still in the same position, I know the information from the secretary is new, but we had kind of decided that since it's rare, if ever, that happens, that they hit 25%, that the progressive design build contract language was more important to us, which is why we've got support on there. Derek, would it be helpful if we went and said anything to the sponsors, or?
Well, I'll tell you, Andrade, the House sponsor, made it pretty clear, which is why the department secretary actually went to, as JW mentioned, went to the sponsors, because when we met with Andrade, his point was, I need to hear from the secretary on where he is on this. And so now that he's gotten that directly, the sponsors have heard directly from the secretary. Everything now is at a standstill to kind of see what happens next. But JW is correct. They've definitely gone on record.
So we know that we knew he was meeting with him, but we do know that he talked to him about that specific.
Correct.
I'm sure I'll hear talk to a couple of you on our legislative call later, but if I don't,
Okay.
wonderful.
Any questions on that? Both of those bills still have one committee each before they would go to the floor. So there's still a little bit of time to work on those. Another change that we've had, not to Senate Bill 940, but for those interested in the professional structural engineer's license, it's moving along nicely in the Senate. It'll be up in its final committee next week, and should pass out of there with no problems. The problem has always been with this bill that the House doesn't like the idea of new licenses. They've been trying to eliminate licenses rather than create new ones. And, they're just more anti-regulation over on that side. So what they've done is now created a structural engineer recognition program, where those individuals that pass that test, for the structural engineers would receive recognition, but that's all it is. I mean, there's no fee for it. You can use it in your marketing and things like that. But it seems to me, and I need to talk with our structural folks, because a lot of this was just done in the last day or so too. Not only did they completely change what they were doing from a license to just a recognition program, but they've also, you'll notice, removed it from the State Administration and Technology Subcommittee, which means they're taking it straight to the Commerce Committee, and skipping one of the three committees, which to me means this is what they intend to do. Would you have any different read on that, Derek?
I think you're right. I mean, at the end of the day, it was always going to be depend upon the House. It's now in Representative Ungolia's committee, which is going to be even more interesting because he's known for being very anti new regulations, and so it's very interesting to see what he's going to do overall with this. I do know that there's been conversations had, there's been efforts made by the House sponsor. I know that Representative Toledo has been trying hard to convince them of it.
He doesn't give up.
He does not give up, and so there, it's bipartisan in support. She's been trying her best as an engineer to make the case. But if there's anybody who will tell you no to your face and be unmoved by it, it's Angolia, who's the chair of the Next Stop.
Yeah, there's no doubt about that. No doubt at all. All right, well, I'll get with our structural people because, again, I think that happened yesterday or the day, maybe in the afternoon, the day before, but I'm not sure that's exactly what they want, if they want to go forward with that or if they'd rather just back off and wait.
Yeah, does it say test only, or did it have anything for grandfathering, or just recognizing people who took a test?
Basically, it's written right now so that it's just people that take the test.
Okay.
I'll go back and check that just to confirm, Sean, but I don't recall seeing anything about grandfathering in there. It's just kind of, they sort of mailed one in like, all right, we see this bill every year, so here's how far we're willing to go. So anyway, so that's passed one committee. It's still got one to go since they removed it from the second. It'll be in the final committee in the Senate next week. So, it's getting there unless the structural engineers decide they just would rather have nothing. So I'll get with them and see where we're at. And then that brings us then to the final ones, the mandatory building inspections, the bills that are there to deal with the Surfside collapse and what's going to happen in the future. 1702 did not move this week. I just, I kept that up there that it had been amended to require 5 years of structural design and 5 years of inspection experience for the architect or engineer doing the inspection. There was, Carlos got a question yesterday from one of the senators that somebody's beefing about. There's not going to be enough engineers to do this. We've tried to, make that as large a pool as possible. We know that it's going to be tight. There is plenty of time, in my mind, there's plenty of time built into that bill. Any building that's over 30 years old, has to have this first inspection by December 31st of 2024. So there's some time built in there. And with that time being built in there, I think what they're after is allowing people working under the supervision of a structural engineer to do the inspections. And I don't think we're ready to go there yet. But with that time built in there, if we did see that, we didn't have enough, maybe we can make some adjustments and try to help out. So, and talking with Carlos yesterday, he got back to the senator and just said, it needs to be these people with the 5 years of experience. And that's down. We had actually asked for 10, I believe, on the structural design part of that, but the Senate staff thought that was too much. And so we landed at 5 and 5. So the same thing goes with Senate Bill 7042. That's the bill that incorporates in everything else. 1702 just deals strictly with the structural and the inspections, and that 7042 takes the language from 1702 and then adds in everything else, the record keeping, reserve requirements, and what have you. But they did not move that bill again this past week. That had come out the week before. So those two were sitting still this week while the House made their move, which is House Bill 7069. If you pull that up, if you click that hyperlink there, it's going to say PCB for PPE 22-03. But that's a proposed committee bill, and when it passed out, it then gets a number, and it will be referred to at least one more committee. It does a lot of what we asked. It just does it in a different way. It requires basically the phase 1 inspection in that bill is what they call a reserve study that would be required every 10 years. That got some pushback from companies that do these reserve studies for condominiums and cooperatives that don't use engineers and architects, and this calls for these reserve studies to be done by an architect or an engineer, which I don't think is necessary. It wasn't something our group ever discussed, and it seems like this company and they represented themselves as the largest company that does reserve studies, at least in the country, if not in the world, and basically said they wouldn't be able to do business in Florida if that passed. So this one's got a little more controversy around it. It's also got the same things that we got to clean up in this bill that we cleaned up in the others, and that is it just calls strictly for a engineer licensed under 471 to do the inspections. There needs to be some experience criteria, make sure we've got structural engineers with some experience that are doing these inspections. Otherwise, it's open to anybody that's got a PE license. And that's not good. There's a few other things in there. They used a term, the Senate bill doesn't have this, but they've got some verbiage in there that talks about, certifying, or I don't know if certifying is the right word, but saying that the building is safe. And the work group did talk quite a bit about that because Miami-Dade tries to require that. And there's no definition of what a safe building is, and there probably isn't anything that actually is a safe building. Something can happen, and you say it's safe one day and something happens and it's not safe the next day. But what they do have in the Florida Building Code is a definition of what is an unsafe condition. And so we'll try to get that. If we can't get that out altogether, we'll just try to get it changed so that, in the report that the engineer would give, it would say, unsafe conditions, per Florida Building Code rule number, whatever, were not observed. To try to help out that, because hate having undefined. We all hate having undefined terms in there like that. It gives the trial lawyers a big wide opening to drive through. So we'll work on that, and then
Alan,
there's a couple other little verbiage things in there that, they're using terms that are defined elsewhere in the statutes, but don't not in the context of building inspection. So we need to work a little bit on the verbiage there. Not that it's wrong what they're trying to do. I wouldn't say that we're against this bill. There's just some things we need to clean up. Yeah, go ahead, Carlos.
Yeah, you said reserve, or is it recertification study that is what they're referring to? Because in the notes here it says requires periodic recertifications every 10 years. That's in line, right, with the Senate bill? Because you mentioned the word reserve. I wonder what they're talking.
What my notes are saying is they have the original 30 years if you're more than 3 miles from the coast, 25 years if you're within 3 miles, and then you'd have to be recertified every 10 years after that. Separate from that, I don't mention this reserve study here because we've always stayed away from that. Separate from that, they require a reserve study every 5 years.
What I remember hearing throughout is that they're wanting to make sure that these condominiums have sufficient money in their reserves to make the improvements or make the changes that need to be made based on those reports. So
right.
Okay, maybe that's what that is.
That's true. There's a lot of language. This is a very large bill.
95 pages.
I just try to stick to our part of it, but this reserve study they want, and when the fellow testified on it, he said, really they should be doing these reserve studies about every 3 years. And I apologize. I said 5 years. It would be every 10 years. And he was, saying that, a lot can change in 10 years. You can do a reserve study, and if you're not going to do another one for 10 years, they may be fine that first study, and by 10 years later, things have changed and they no longer have the money. But they've got a lot of stuff in there about reserves and reserve studies, and I think they'll get that worked out. I talked to the gentleman a little bit afterward. I said, look, that wasn't part of our recommendations that the architects and engineers be involved in that. And I'm like, so, however I can help get that worked out, we're glad to do. But I'm trying to stay out of all that reserve stuff because that's all the attorneys and condo associations. But yeah, the House is very adamant. You can tell by reading their bill that, on the reserves, because they take away their right to use the money for anything other than repairs, to the building. That's set aside special from just normal stuff that they may use their reserves for. And they do a lot. So they're really paying attention to the reserves issue, which is good. Which is good. They need the money there if they have to do substantial repairs.
Okay, thanks for the clarification. I agree.
Mm-hmm. And so that bill, it's got a number right now. It has not yet been referred. That bill was up yesterday morning at about 9 o'clock. So there were no amendments to the original bill that came out. The bill was popped out like the day before that, and they just ran it through. So now they'll get down to the nitty gritty of trying to work through the details. And then with the two bills not being, whichever one comes out of the Senate, and I imagine that's going to be 70-42, they're going to have to work out the differences between the two before we have a final product. So there's still quite a bit of work to be done on this bill. And I think, it's going to take most of the rest of the session, if not all the rest of the session, to get that done. So. And we'll have, after this week, we have 4 weeks left. So. And then the final two, I took a couple more off. And this report looked really, really good when I got started because everything that we had initially had a pose next to was gone. But now I've got 3 unknowns. So we'll have to figure those out. But most of the stuff that we were opposed to at the beginning has disappeared. The 2 that I'm taking off, dealt with that, removing language that requires the agencies to kind of spread the work out amongst the firms that are competing for the work, and it opened up CCNA. So for all intents and purposes, any of this can come back. we continue to watch for it, but for all intents and purposes, I think these two bills are done. So do we have any questions? All right, well, hearing none, please, once again, if you have comments to make about the construction defects claims bills, you can always, those bills are hyperlinked on that report. You can just click on the bill number and see the language of the most current version of the bill. Anybody that's interested in that issue, please, don't hesitate to contact me or email me. And I'll work with the structural engineers to see, where they're at as far as just having a recognition program, which I don't think is really going to get very far with them, but we'll see. But other than that, things are progressing, and it'll probably speed up here over the next few weeks.
Hey, Alan, I got a quick one. At our meeting with DOT this past week, I think it was JW, and if he's still on the line, was there any mention, or is there any bill dealing with the inflation cost, or any measures that the state is willing to take or is thinking of taking right now? I thought JW had mentioned something, but I wasn't paying too much attention to that.
So
Yeah,
Gus,
he did. I haven't been able to identify that bill yet.
well, I thought it was going into the final budget process, Alan, in the proviso. So yeah, just for the committee, there's a movement by FTBA to set aside $150 million out of the excess revenues to be given to the department outside of the work program to offset increased material costs. And that issue still being obviously hotly debated, but it would be during the budget resolution process, I guess. Is that the correct way to put that, Alan, as they're
Right.
finalizing the budget?
Yes.
So it would be independent of the bill funding the DOT, but just a one-time thing, because we have the excess revenues now. Nobody knows how that's going to come out, or how they're going to feel about it as they get through the process, but that's what FTBA's intention is, to try to set aside money specifically for increased material costs.
Well, and with everything going the way it did on Wednesday, JW, no, I didn't end up having lunch with an aunt, but we're trying to set something up for next week. So, all that will happen, probably the last week of session. So I'll get with him and see who we need to talk to help him out with that.
Alan, what about?
Go ahead.
Sorry, I was going to ask, what about the bill that you and Paul Foley had discussed? We're dealing with the sovereign immunity.
I was just going to bring that up. I hadn't put that on my report, but Paul Foley from our transportation committee contacted me. There's a couple of bills out there that deal with the amounts of money that government agencies, state and local, pay, when there's a claim against them or one of their employees. And, currently you can get whatever judgment or make whatever settlement you want, but all you're going to get is $200,000 per person or $300,000 for an incident. And then if your judgment or your settlement is for more than that, you have to come to the legislature with what they call a claims bill and get the legislature to approve that. And Gruters has one of these bills, Derek. What this bill does is it takes they adjust it about every decade. So it takes it from 200,000 per person, and both sides are pretty much the same, from 200,000 a person to $1 million per person. And then it's left right there at the House. So it would be $1 million per person or $1 million per incident. The Senate 2 days ago amended their bill, and they had upped it to 200, 300 to 300, 400. And then they amended it, though, to be $1 million per person and $3 million per incident. And so Paul brought up the fact that, say, a CEI, for example, is working as an agent of the state or the agent of the government, and so their liability limits were the 200, 300, and so this would impact them, which I didn't realize that this would have an impact. Obviously, the cities and the counties are absolutely pitching a fit. It'll result in more lawsuits and higher payouts if it passes. But looking at it, it's pretty much on a rail. I mean, it's moving, and so I'm not sure exactly if the cities and counties can get in the way. I don't know if I certainly have said that we're concerned that this is going to affect our members that find themselves in this position, with increased liability and increased insurance costs. But the cities and counties are able to go in there and show how many billions of dollars this is going to cost them, if it passes. So, I'm we're kind of caught in the crossfire on this one. So, but we'll keep working on it and see exactly if we can get our arms around it. Like I said, Paul mentioned this to me 2 or 3 days ago, and I've been trying to figure out exactly what's going on. And, is there a way that, it can be done that, and I don't see one yet, but is there something we could do to minimize the effects on our members? So I'll get that on the report so that it'll be there next week for this report. But thank you, Kelly. Anything else? All right. Well, if hearing nothing, we'll go ahead and call this one over.
Great job.
Yep. Thank you for the info that specifies a CIA or CEI as an agent of the state. I'll look into that. But yeah, if you got any questions on any of these bills or any of the bills that you don't even see on the report, don't hesitate to contact us.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks,
Thank you,
Alan.
everybody.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.